Hi everyone, hope you're doing well. Welcome to part 2 of my Industrial Techno 5 Ableton template explanation. Last week I talked about the sound design and the MIDI pattern, and this week we're gonna talk more about the arrangement, mixing and mastering. So basically this track I've been creating live during my live stream session from scratch. It's every 2 Monday, you can come and watch me creating tracks live. And yeah, let's have a listen and let's jump into Ableton. Alright, so let's talk about a little bit how the idea came and how everything came into place before to go straight into the arrangement by section. I think I started with the groove, basically mainly with the kick, and then I looked for some percussion on top, but couldn't really find nothing. I kind of struggled a little bit to find something I really like it, until I found, this lead melody, which was... And then I decided to build the track around that. Obviously, I knew I will need some percussion as well, a kind of a lead percussion to kind of take a break a little bit from the main lead. And so that's what I've done with this percussion too, which is gonna come mainly in the verse. Very screaming percussion, and yeah, you can see in the session view, because that's all where I started. I like to create my track like this. First I have all my elements, and then I build the track scene by scene like this, and I experiment, see what's work, what doesn't, and then after I print this more in the arrangement view, I kind of record it live and then rearrange a little bit some of the few parts, make them shorter or longer. But yeah, the idea, it was like having the main lead playing most of the time, and at one point I will have a break here, so which is gonna be the verse 2, where I will play more with the percussion, and then after I will bring back the melody, the lead, and with the perc playing together. So let's start with the global arrangement. Let's start with the arrangement part by part. So we have first our intro, which is gonna have just the kick drum and the pad. So I like to use pad as intro to always kind of set the mood, fill up the blank a little bit. Then we're gonna introduce our hats and percussion. So you can see there is something happening every time I'm gonna introduce a new sound. You're gonna have most of the time a low cut here, so it's just an EQ8 with a low cut here, and I deactivate when I need. Usually right before to introduce a new element, for example like here, you're gonna have this EQ activated, and then removing, which is gonna create the low cut. I'm doing also something very often on the kick. I have this beat repeat, which is gonna make the kick like kind of rattle repeat. You're gonna hear dun dun dun, and sometimes it goes a bit faster, and that's how I do in the transition to every time I add a new element, it's happening like this. So then we are still in the intro, we start to introduce the lead. So here's the lower part of the lead. You can see you have a low pass filter, so like this we can introduce the lead slowly and in a very smooth way. You can hear it's coming. Then we're gonna introduce the other part of the lead, like the higher part, and then we go into the break. So for this track I didn't want it too long break, you need to keep the things driving and going on, so just a low cut all the time for the break. I removed the kick and the bass like a bar before to create this nice effect, and yeah, obviously I keep opening the filter during the break. Okay, so here was a bit like this. I keep everything up until the last bar, where is the last time the pattern played just by itself one more time before to drop. And this it's working because it's about a contrast of dynamic. You have something very rich, and then you cut everything to go down and have something just with the lead and the pad playing, and then you bring back the kick drum, and it's very impactful. Here what I done as well with the cutoff, it's instead of having my lead playing with fully filter open, a lot of information and energy, I drop with the filter a little bit lower. I don't know, it's just work. And then after I reopen it straight away when we go into the drop. So yeah. Just work. Then again, back the perks and the hats like before. Then we're gonna introduce the ride. And you can see you have this lead 2 pattern who's gonna start to play higher pitched note just to add variation. Obviously, you have some variation here with the filter. It's actually an EQ8, but it's kind of a low pass filter, which is gonna go down and up just to add a bit of movement and variation. And then I introduce as well, to break the monotony, an extra percussion. So this is like an offbeat percussion. Usually I use a snare. Here I use a percussion, but it's gonna play offbeat. It's just gonna add extra energy. So here another break. Here we're gonna use the break to go from the chorus to the verse, getting rid of the main lead. So here's the same idea than the first break, but the opposite. Instead of bringing element and opening the filter, we're gonna remove the element lead, and by lowering the filter, you can see that what I like to do with the drum usually for the break, to don't remove altogether too fast, I will first reduce the ride. So straight up when we enter in the break, I reduce the ride, and then after and the perk 3, and then after I will remove the rest of the drum at the drop. Again, this is, you do that for creating contrast. So here was a part where I needed to get rid a little bit of the main lead, like of the melody, to don't hear it too much, and I needed to introduce a new kind of lead element, which is gonna be this perk 2 here. I haven't made it come straight up because I felt like the way the drop was with the kick and the lower melody was just working well first. So yeah, I'm just playing few bars before to introduce it, and yeah, let's put it back from there. No ride, no perk. Lower down the filter. Just the kick and the lead, but lower. And yeah, this is taking over the lead in terms of roll. And so here I've done that. Usually this is something it's worked well. Again, it's about contrast and in dynamic. It's like I had this period here and I say, okay, why not to get rid of the drum actually, because it worked well. This is a trick I do sometimes. I just do a locket, then get rid of the hats, and it's kind of, I don't know, creating this very high energy moment when you don't have drum, which is cool. And then later you reintroduce the hats full on at a higher, because here the hats are way much more driving than what they were used to be. You see, you go from this to this, which were way much more driving, and then we're gonna use this as well to introduce the lead back again, and goes into the break 3. Okay, we are in break 3, very similar to the first one. It is a little bit longer, but it's the same idea, where we're gonna open the filter here. You can see it's going up and up and up. Before to drop, we're gonna get rid of everything but the main lead. Actually here we keep the perk, but in terms of drums, we remove all the drums to create, again, this contrasting dynamic. Instead of being 1 bar, here is 2 bar, but the idea is the same. It's exactly the same idea. The difference with the first one, the first drop is here, the filter, we leave it open to really get this full-on energy, and to add variation to don't have exactly the same than for the first drop. But yeah, then it goes like this, and here again we're gonna introduce our variation and some hats later on. Yeah, for this track I try to change every 8 bar, having something new, and then you have again a ride coming, you have this extra percussion layer on top. Which is basically very similar to perk 2, again it's an extra layer, kind of pitch it higher, just to add variation and work well with the ride, and then after we will have this offbeat as well coming. So here is kind of the climax of the track where everything is playing very busy, all the perks are playing, all the synth, all the drums, everything is playing. They're very energetic, very busy part. And then we're gonna go into the break 4, which is basically our final break. So here again, same trick I've done before. That is mean like when I enter in the break, I get rid of the main percussion and the ride. This way I get rid of things progressively. Here you're gonna have all your filter going down. Look at as well. Everything goes down. So here it's like the outro, but you can see this part of the outro, it's still very energetic. It's not really like, you can still be considered part of the track, but yeah, with all the perk, and then I will start to do the trick I do like usually, like I use the locket to go into the next part of the track, and I use it to remove things. Like the same way I was using at the intro to add new element, you know, I do a locket and then add element. Here I do the same but the other way, put a locket and then remove something, put a locket, remove something, and yeah, I do that for the rest of the track. Here I don't do locket. And yeah, and that's pretty much our global arrangement. Alright, so let's talk a little bit about the automation variation. There is not much here in this track. Like I was saying, like the filter here, it's not a filter, but it's like an EQ, but it's kind of a filter here that I use to introduce the sound or to remove the sound between the chorus and break. You can see I use it as well to add variation along the track. It's not a crazy modulation, it's more like a slow opening and closing modulation to add variation. I think I've done this the same with lead 3 and the other synth. You have on the kick, you have this beat repeat that I'm doing sometimes. This is great to add variation. You can see at different speed as well. You see sometimes it's dun-dun, sometimes it's more like trrrm. That's one of the things I've done to add variation. And yeah, like I said, the locket that I use as a break or like to introduce new elements. This is more DJ things, but it works well as well for track and arrangement. But yeah, not much in terms of modulation. Here I've more done some more change with, for example, extra layer. So I will have extra layer for the leads, playing high note, low note. For the perk as well, I had like this perk, which was like playing higher pitch than this one. Is the same pattern, similar sound, but just a layer higher. But yeah, then that's pretty much it. There is this gain here, but it's not really like, this is because you see, because of the rumble and everything, when I cut the kick here, I'm gonna have a tail. Wait, you're gonna listen how it is without this automation. You can see how this low end is still playing, even though there is a low cut, you can still hear it. Rather, when I do that, it cuts straight. Right, let's talk about mixing. So if you're familiar with my video, you know what I'm gonna say. I personally think that mixing in electronic music, or I mean, at least in techno, it's more or less 80-90% done with your sound selection, which means like which sample you're gonna decide to pick up to go together, which synth sound. Because if you are very careful with that, then you wouldn't have that much things to do. Usually there is some exception, obviously, but it depends if you have a very rich track with a lot of element or not. But there is another thing I usually like to kind of mix as I produce, which means that every time I'm adding a new element, I'm making sure that it's fitting perfectly the track. So make sure it's at the right level, pan correctly. If I can throw on a little EQ because I feel like there is some unnecessary frequency that I don't need, I will do it. Yeah, now another tip I can give you about mixing is when using a delay or reverb, always being careful with the amount of delay or reverb you put. So the thing is, with delay and reverb, I personally use them more as a sound design effect than as a mixing purpose. So for example, the delay is gonna add groove. The reverb is gonna really give a tone, a room tone to your sound. For example, I was talking about last week, like the perk is more in the cavernous kind of space. Drum, I will put them a short reverb with a short decay just to be more like kind of a room effect, you know. You just want to have a little bit of reverb, not too much. But yeah, overall, like you need to see, but always being careful with the dry wet of either the delay or the reverb, and then being careful with the reverb decay and with the feedback of the delay, because sometimes we don't realize but we put a little bit too much. And again, as it's sound design effect, you always have to trust your ears, and if you see that you're trying to reduce this parameter to kind of save space on your mix, make sure that it doesn't change the tone of your sound, because you don't want to lose the tone. So it's always good to try, if you feel like one thing is a bit too messy, try to reduce that maybe, and see until when it's changing the tone, and then you can stop, and little by little it's gonna make you mix better. It's never really like one big change, it's always like small little change everywhere. Usually EQ, so this depends as well of the track, if you have many elements or no. I will usually cut the low. Here for this track I cut a lot the low, because the thing is, what's happening in this track is I use a lot effect like amp, which gonna add a lot of harmonics but on your whole signal. So that means like you're gonna even saturate the low and create even more harmonics in the low. And for example, for hats, you don't always need all this lower information, so it's better to cut. And especially in this track where you have a lot of percussion, you have a lot of elements which are more in the high, but because of the distortion it brings harmonics in the low, and you don't really need all of this low, because the thing is, if you had just one or two elements, might be fine, but because you have like 5, 6, 7, if you leave this low on the 7 element, it's just gonna create a lot of useless information on the low. And so that's why I cut almost everything. Again, when you work with amp, it might add some very harsh frequency. So that's why I use often this low cut here, where I tame a little bit the very higher frequency. Sometimes when I use drum bass as well, I use the damp, which is the same purpose. And yeah, you can see I use drum bass a lot on this track. I like drum bass as a kind of like overall processing of your track, you know, because I like to use effect in insert, like my delay, distortion, reverb, they're all in insert. So yeah, I like to use drum bass at the end of the chain to kind of glue everything and add a bit of cohesion into your track. So I will usually use compression to kind of glue. I like to usually use crunch because it's at harmonic in the mid-high and make you sound a little bit more modern somehow, and damping to reduce the very harsh frequency creating by crunch, and then transient usually to reduce a little bit the tail of the reverb. So that's overall how I work. You see low cut, reverb, and I use sidechain obviously a lot because to get this pumping effect, sometimes it's great to add groove, you know, to have this pumping effect, but also you leave space to the kick to cut it through the mix. And yeah, nothing crazy about mixing. You have here, I use the delay as a stereo, which like has a has effect just to make the sound in stereo. I explained it earlier that because I have 3 layers, I put the lower layer more on the side and the other higher layer in more in the middle. So this way you don't have everything in the middle. It's like spread it a little bit. And yeah, another thing as well, which is important to do, is to having your level right, which is as important as putting effect or EQ or compressor. This unfortunately I cannot give you tips because each track is different. Each bass for different tracks is gonna be different kind of dynamic. Same with the hats, some are gonna have more energy than others. So unfortunately this you have to do by ear, and you can only be better by doing it more and more. But yeah, sometimes it's something we overlook because we think, okay, it's just the volume, it doesn't really matter, or you can compensate the volume with saturation or stuff like that. But it's very important to do. I usually start with the kick, and then I had the drums, sometimes the ambience, and then after the leads, adding one layer by one layer, making sure that the right level help. And yeah, that's pretty much it for the mixing. Now let's talk about mastering. So usually on the previous template I was creating always a new effect chain, but recently I share with you, this is a free rack I created, which is kind of a mastering rack, which basically was based on all of the mastering chain of my previous template, and you can basically find the same kind of device. So this is what I like to call homemade mastering, because I always recommend mastering to be done by someone else. But it's a great tool to have an idea how your track will sound if it was mastered by someone, or if you want to go to try your track in the club or wherever. It's a great way to have a bit of knowledge in mastering and to have a tool that can help you reach this kind of bigger sound. So here you will have first, I had some glue compression. So I like to use glue compression to kind of glue everything like a little bit. So I usually often use the same parameter, slow attack, because you don't want to ruin the transient of your kick and the punch. The release around here and the ratio at 4 to don't have something too aggressive. And then with the threshold, I try to have like between 0 and 5 dB of reduction. It really depends on the track. It really depends if you want something more pumping. But yeah, and then I will compensate with the makeup. One thing important when you set up your compressor, you need to EQ the input, so this way the thing you have a look at, so this way everything which is under 200 Hz not gonna trigger your compressor, because what happens if you don't do that is gonna be your kick or your low end that's gonna trigger the compressor, because it's the part of your track with get the higher energy, and you don't want that to trigger your compressor. You want to have a global compression, like more catching the higher transient to have something a bit more cohesive. And yeah, that's what the 2 first macro does, and that's what it does here. Then I have an EQ8 with everything under 30 Hz cut. Here a little bit of boost at 1 kilo and a little bit of boost at 5. So this is all mapped to macros. So basically when I do clarity boost, it's boosting everything. This one I didn't use here, it's bass. I have a channel EQ again to add a bit of high boost. So you can see it's gonna boost the very high at 5 kilo, and then the shelf as well is gonna boost everything. So here I've been quite subtle as well, just 1.5 2 dB of. The thing is always a bit tricky with this type of track, because you want the kick to be very important, and then it's very hard to have some high information, because you want the kick is kind of taking over everything, but you don't want the bass to be too weak neither. You want this massive kick and low end. So yeah, it's always tricky. A little bit of utility is just gonna add a bit of stereo, make sure the bass 120 is mono. I added more with this EQ in mid-side mode, where I boost here the side 1 dB. It's very gentle. Unfortunately, Ableton doesn't really have like a good stereo width effect, especially for mastering, so you have to use what you have. It's very subtle anyway. Like with everything, if you want to have a nice stereo, it's better to try to have it before when you produce than the mastering, but can be great to add a bit of width at the mastering, I reckon. Then you have 2 stages of saturation, 1 digital clip, 1 analog clip, which is controlled by this macro. It's just to add some extra harmonics. So you can hear it's really adding little by little, and overall that's what's gonna do the whole thing. Then you had color limiter. So this I don't really use it as a limiter, I just use it to add a bit of warmth. You're gonna hear how it's make a difference. Here it's actually a little bit more subtle than usual, and then I have 2 limiter, just for loudness. So 2 better than 1, because like this is less abrupt in terms of catching the peak. This is really like for the last final loudness. yeah, so again, if you are interested in the rack, I put the link in the description. There is a video where I explain how to use the rack, and it's available for free. So yeah. All right, hope you like this video. Thank you very much for watching, and you can grab the template if you want to support me. And see you next time, guys. Bye bye.